The weeping spear breathed around her, warm and slow and patient. Tess Corwin pressed her thumb against the access plate behind her left ear, and the world sharpened by half a degree. Her neural implant blinked green. The ship's bioweb brushed against her awareness, a faint itch at the back of her skull, and she killed the connection before it could settle in. She did not trust anything that thought with her. The cargo bay pulsed with amber light from the living walls. The floor gave slightly under her boots like packed earth after rain. Around her the squad sat in loose clusters, checking gear and saying nothing worth remembering. 11 other conscripts. Some she knew by name. Most she knew only by the way they held their weapons, tight, loose, or somewhere in between. Bethany dropped down next to her. She held out a ration bar in her palm like an offering. "You eat that," Bethany said, "or I'm telling Sage you've got a vitamin deficiency." Tess took the bar. She did not open it. "Drop zone's supposed to be beautiful," Bethany said. "All that violet grass, real poetic, makes you want to write a song about dying for corporate interests." No one laughed. Bethany's smile thinned and she let it fall. Lieutenant Pax stood up at the center of the bay. They cracked their knuckles one at a time, a sound like small bones snapping. The squad went quiet. "Insertion in 30, Pax said. "We're hitting the deck near the Verdant Drift Processing Station. Primary objective is facility security. We hold the structure for 6 hours while the trade factor finalizes their deal. Secondary objective is keeping our heads attached to our bodies." Pax scanned the room. Their eyes moved flat and unhurried. "The Free Systems goon in charge is called Tenril, insectoid. They do not negotiate like we negotiate. They do not care about wounded. They care about leverage. We are the leverage if we get sloppy." Krell stood up from their corner. The Sporewind trade factor was tall and thin, with bark gray skin and frilled sensory spurs along their neck. The spurs pulsed a slow amber. Their voice was dry leaves shifting. "You have your orders," Krell said. "The Free Systems do not respect property law as other species understand it. If the negotiation collapses, you will delay any hostile force until the ship can retrieve you." Krell looked at the squad the way a man looks at a row of tools. "You are assets, not partners. Do not mistake the distinction." The trade factor returned to their data pad. Tess watched the spurs along Krell's neck. They flickered in a rapid pattern, short pulses, a beat, another cluster, not random. A signal, an active transmission. Sage caught her looking. The shorter Sporewind medic met her eyes and said nothing. Their bioluminescent nodules flickered once and went still. Bethany leaned close. "What was that?" "Nothing," Tess said. The bay went dark. The walls contracted. The air pressure shifted, and Tess felt it in her teeth, a deep ache behind the jaw. The floor vibrated upward through her boots. The weeping spear was in the atmosphere, and the whole ship was clenching against the drag. For 30 seconds there was only the hum of the hull and the sound of people breathing too fast. Then light returned. The bay doors cycled open. The air hit her first, thin and cold with a sharp metallic tang that coated the back of her throat. Chemical exhaust from the processor. Tess stepped off the ramp into grass the color of bruised fruit. The ground crunched under her boots. The grass crushed into a pale powder that smelled like cinnamon and burnt sugar. The atmosphere processor loomed ahead, a tower of gray metal wrapped in thick Sporewind growth, breathing through organic vents that steamed in the cold air. The structure looked like something carved and then left to heal. Krell stepped off the ramp ahead of them. The weeping spear lifted behind the trade factor, rising on a column of heat and pressure. The ship climbed into the clouds and disappeared. Krell did not look back. Tess understood it in that moment, the clean shape of it, the math of it. There was no trade negotiation. There was a delaying action. The Sporewind were not here to win a deal. They were here to bleed the Free Systems, and the humans were the cost of doing business. She looked at Bethany. Bethany was watching the clouds where the ship had vanished. "Tess," Bethany said. "I know." Pax moved past them, weapon up, eyes on the tree line. "Move. We secure the structure in 5 minutes or this whole thing falls apart." The squad moved. The grass crunched under their boots. The chemical tang thickened as they approached the processor. Tess activated her neural implant for terrain data. The hum behind her left ear was familiar, a low pressure like a thumb pressed against bone. The feed showed her the ground composition, the building layout, the heat signatures of the vents. Nothing alive between them and the door. She killed the link. The ground shook. Tess stopped. The tremor ran up through her boots and into her knees. A deep vibration, not an explosion, something heavy, something moving. The tree line tore open 200 meters to their left. The thing that came through was not a machine. It was alive, a living fortress of chitin and muscle, broad as a cargo truck and low to the ground. Armored plates covered its back, layered like overlapping shields. Its legs were thick columns. Its head was a blunt wedge with a row of bioluminescent eyes that glowed a cold white. A Free Systems biotank. And it was coming straight for them. Tess pressed her back against the processor's support strut and held up a closed fist. The squad stopped. Every boot sank into violet powder that puffed up in silent clouds. She pointed left, then right, 2 fingers, then 3. The squad spread into a line along the strut's shadow, weapons raised, breath held. The biotank stood at the tree line. It was a mountain of chitin and sinew, 6 legs planted like pillars, a cannon mount embedded deep in its carapace. Steam curled from its joints. It was not advancing, it was waiting. Bethany slid in next to Tess, her voice barely a whisper. "That thing is just watching us." "Because it knows where we are," Tess said, "and it knows we have nowhere to go." Above them in the Weeping Spear's observation blister, Krell studied the thermal display. The humans showed as 17 orange dots clustered behind the processor's bulk. The biotank was a white-hot smear at the edge of the tree line. Krell calculated the kill radius. 17 meters of overpressure, 2 seconds of plasma bloom. The humans were inside that radius. Krell made no move to alter the ship's position. Acceptable collateral. Pax crawled along the line, low and fast, until they reached Tess. Their knuckles were already cracked, the joints popping like small snaps. "We push left, flank it, catch it before it cycles the cannon." Tess shook her head. She pointed at the ground. The violet powder lay in faint ripples, concentric arcs spreading outward from the tree line, not wind patterns, something buried. "They herded us here," Tess said. "They know exactly where we're going to run." Pax looked at the ground, their jaw tightened. "So we sit and wait for it to fire." "I need another option." Sage pressed forward from the line, their mossy shoulders catching the dim light. Their bioluminescent nodules had dimmed to a faint amber, barely visible in the haze. They spoke in a voice like dry leaves shifting. "The processor's internal network is still active." Tess turned. "How active?" Sage pointed at the wall behind them. A data port, recessed and sealed with a bioweb membrane that pulsed with a slow rhythm. "If we can reach the central console, we may be able to trigger an atmospheric pressure vent beneath the biotank." Pax stared at them. "A vent, that's not a weapon." "No," Sage agreed, "but it would destabilize the ground. The biotank's legs are load-bearing. If the substrate collapses, it falls. It cannot fire from the ground." Tess looked at the tree line. The biotank had not moved. It was patient. It had all the time in the world. "We split," Tess said. "Pax, take 5 to the left. Draw fire, make them think we're running." Pax nodded once. "And you?" "I take the rest to the maintenance hatch. We go inside." Bethany stepped closer. Her hand found Tess's arm in the dark. She did not speak. The touch was brief, just a signal that she was still there. Tess met her eyes. "Stay close." Bethany's grin was thin and sharp. "Where else would I be?" Above, Krell received a communication. The biolink shimmered, and Tenral's image resolved in the air, chitinous plates, mandibles clicking with mechanical precision. The insectoid's voice came through in staccato bursts, each word a separate strike. "Your assets are pinned. Withdraw from the verdant drift. This is your final offer." Krell's neck spurs pulsed a slow amber. "I have no authority to withdraw." Both parties knew this was a lie. Tenral's mandibles clicked again. "Then your assets will be eliminated. The biotank will fire in 4 minutes. You have that long to reconsider." The link died. The image collapsed to static and then to nothing. Krell turned back to the ground display. The 17 orange dots had split. 5 were moving left, spreading into a thin line. The other 12 were advancing toward the processor's base, hugging the wall, moving with a purpose that made no sense. Krell watched them reach a dark seam in the processor's hull, a maintenance hatch. The lead human forced it open with a tool that sparked once, brief and bright. They were going inside. Krell tilted their head, the gesture foreign even to themselves. The biotank should have pinned them. They should have scattered or surrendered or died. Instead, they were adapting. The trade factor recorded this observation for later analysis. Tess forced the hatch open with the breaching bar. The seal tore with a wet sound, and heat rolled out in a wave that smelled of ozone and hot metal. The corridor beyond was dark. Every surface vibrated with a low thrum, the machinery working at planetary scale. Sage pushed past her, their nodules flaring to a weak green light. The light made shadows stretch in wrong directions, pooling in corners that looked deeper than they should be. The pulse of the light matched Sage's breathing, slow, cautious, alive. Bethany followed Tess inside. The rest of the squad filed in behind them, boots echoing on graded flooring that gave slightly with every step. The hatch closed behind them, sealing them in darkness. Tess activated her neural implant. A faint map resolved in her peripheral vision, the corridor ahead sketched in pale blue lines, but the resolution was poor. The processor's bioweb was interfering, its signals bleeding into the implant's frequency. She saw gaps where there should be walls. She saw intersections that led nowhere. "It's dirty in here," she muttered. Sage turned. "What is?" "The map. The processor's network is scrambling my implant." Sage's nodules flickered. "That should not be possible. The processor is not transmitting." Tess looked at them. "Then what is?" Sage had no answer. They moved deeper. The corridor opened into a chamber the size of a cargo bay, filled with stacks of cylindrical tanks that hummed with stored pressure. Pipes ran along the ceiling, thick as a human torso, carrying something that steamed at the joints. The heat was oppressive. Sweat ran down Tess's face and dripped from her chin. Bethany touched her arm again. There, the console. It sat at the far end of the chamber, a curved pedestal covered in bioweb tendrils that pulsed with a slow, rhythmic light. The control surface was organic, shaped from the same living material as the walls. It was waiting. Tess crossed to it. She pressed her palm flat against the surface. The bioweb recognized her as organic, that was enough. The display flickered to life. She began the pressure vent sequence. The console responded, showing a schematic of the ground beneath the processor, the vent shafts running outward in radial lines. She selected the one beneath the biotank's position. She initiated the sequence. Then the display changed. A symbol appeared, a flower inside a circle, encased in a border of thorns. Tess stared at it. "Sage, what is this?" Sage stepped closer. Their nodules went dark. The green light died completely, leaving only the dim glow from the console. "That is a Sporewind proprietary marker," Sage said. Their voice was flat, empty. "The processor does not belong to the free systems." Tess looked at them. "Then who does it belong to?" Sage's bioluminescence flickered back to life, weak and trembling. Krell's trade faction. The whole negotiation was a trap. The chamber was silent, except for the thrum of the machinery, and the sound of the biotank's cannon cycling. The control chamber was a red-lit tomb. Emergency strips cast long shadows across the console where Tess still had her hand pressed flat. The vent interface had gone dark the moment she triggered the release. Somewhere beneath them, superheated gas had turned the biotank's approach into a killing field. But the scraping against the outer wall had not stopped. Sage stood rigid beside her, sensory spurs pulsing a slow, anxious green. Bethany had her weapon trained on the door, her jaw tight. 3 other conscripts fanned out behind them, Donnelly, Reyes, and a woman whose name Tess kept forgetting. Pax and the rest were still outside. The comms were dead. Tess turned to Sage. "That marker Krell put on the processor, what does it mean?" Sage's bioluminescent nodules flickered through a pattern Tess had learned to read as reluctance. The processor was seeded by Krell's trade faction 43 cycles ago. It was a hidden asset, a future leverage point. "A plant?" "Yes, the free systems discovered it 8 cycles ago. Krell used your deployment as cover to reclaim it. The negotiation was never genuine." Tess had expected worse. She had expected to be told they were bait. This was just confirmation. The wall shuddered. A deep, resonant groan traveled through the floor plates. The biotank had hit the processor again, harder this time. Dust sifted from the ceiling. "We can't stay here," Bethany said. "The tank will breach this level in minutes." Tess was already calculating. The main entrance was a kill box. The tank was waiting there, patient and implacable. They needed another route. "There," Bethany's voice cut through the static hum of emergency power. She was pointing at the far corner of the chamber where a hatch was set into the floor. The cover was dark metal, no control panel, no Sporewind symbology. Tess crossed to it. She knelt and ran her fingers along the edge. The metal was cold. Not the ambient cold of the chamber, a deeper cold, like something that had never known heat. "This isn't their design," she said. Sage approached cautiously, their spurs flattened against their neck. I have never seen a lock pattern like this. It predates the processor's construction. Can you open it? Sage touched the surface. Their fingers left faint moisture trails on the metal. No, it is not connected to any network. It is purely mechanical. Tess looked at Donnelly. He carried the thermal cutter. 4 minutes, he said. Do it. The cutter's flame hissed against the ancient metal. The squad formed a perimeter while Donnelly worked, the orange glow of the torch throwing their shadows into wild contortions across the walls. The biotank hit the processor again. Something structural gave way above them, a high, keening shriek of tortured material. The hatch dropped open. Stale air rose from the opening. It was dry and still. No smell of organic growth. No traces of Sporewind biology, just dust and old metal. Tess went first. The stairwell was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. The steps were not designed for Sporewind anatomy. They were too shallow, too regular. The treads were worn smooth by something that had passed this way many times long ago. She counted 47 steps before the stairwell opened into a chamber. The squad stopped behind her. Even Sage went silent. The room was not Sporewind. The walls were smooth, metallic, and marked with symbols no one recognized. They were clean-edged and precise, carved into the surface with a permanence that felt almost religious. The light in the room came from panels embedded in the ceiling, still working after uncounted years. In the center of the chamber, on a low pedestal, rested a disk of dark metal. It was mirror-bright. The surface reflected the red emergency glow from the stairwell, but the light seemed to sink into it rather than bounce away. Along the edge, a single line of text was etched in a script Tess had never studied. She knew it anyway. The letters were human. They were older than any language in the galactic registry, older than the Sporewind, older than the free systems. She could not read them, but she knew them the way she knew the shape of her sister's face. Sage moved forward. They reached out and touched the disk with one cautious finger. It is cold, no biosignature. It is a dead object, not alive the way our technology is alive. What is it? Bethany asked. Sage's spurs pulsed. I cannot tell you. It is not Sporewind. It is not any technology I know. Tess stepped past them. She bent down and closed her fingers around the disk. The neural implant in her jaw flared. A surge of data flooded her visual cortex, images that were not her own. A forest, trees so tall their canopies blocked the sky. A sky the color of oceans, a language she half remembered from dreams she had never had. She dropped the disk. The images stopped. Her implant settled back to baseline, the phantom heat fading from her jaw. It had not been painful. It had been like being recognized by something she had forgotten she knew. Tess, Bethany's voice was sharp. What happened? Tess looked at her sister. She did not answer. She bent down and picked up the disk again. This time the images did not come. But she felt something, a presence at the edge of her awareness, like a light flickering in the next room. The thing was human. It had been waiting here for longer than the Sporewind had existed as a spacefaring civilization. And it had recognized her. The ceiling above them cracked. A deep, grinding rumble traveled through the chamber. Dust and fragments of metal rained down from the ceiling panels. The biotank had breached the processor's upper levels. Tess shoved the disk into her jacket. We move now. She scanned the chamber. At the far end, a tunnel opened into darkness. No lights, no markings. The walls were the same smooth, ancient metal. Where does that go? Reyes asked. I don't know, Tess said. But it's not Sporewind. That makes it a better option than staying. She led them into the tunnel. The darkness swallowed them. Behind her, the cry of the biotank echoed through the collapsing facility, and something else. A lower sound. A rumble that came from beneath their feet, not above. The tunnel sloped downward, and the disk in Tess's jacket stayed warm against her ribs. The bridge of the Weeping Spear hummed at a frequency that sat just at the edge of human hearing. Captain Miles Linden had been listening to it for 12 hours now. He had stopped noticing the grating undertone hours ago. Now he only heard the silence from the ground. He stood at the communications station with his hands flat on the console. The display showed nothing but static. No data bursts, no confirmation pings, no voices. 7 hours of nothing. Krell sat at the command nexus, their bark-textured fingers moving across a glowing surface. The sensory spurs along their neck pulsed a steady, mild amber. They had not looked at Linden once since the last automated check-in failed. Lyndon spoke into the quiet. Status update on the ground team. Krell's fingers did not stop moving. They spoke without turning. The processor structure sustained a catastrophic collapse approximately 4 hours ago. The ground team was inside at the time. The biotank has been neutralized. Lyndon waited. Krell's spurs flickered brighter. There are no survivors registered on the Sporewind biosensors. The processor's network went dark shortly after the collapse. Our telemetry concludes the structure is uninhabitable. Lyndon did not move. He had been standing in the same spot for 6 hours. His knees ached and his lower back screamed at him. He did not shift his weight. Run a surface scan. Krell's fingers paused. They turned their narrow head toward him. The spurs brightened to a sharp, irritated amber. I have informed you of the outcome. The data is conclusive. Run a surface scan, Lyndon repeated. His voice did not change. It came out flat and tired and utterly immovable. Krell held his gaze for a long moment. Then they turned back to the Nexus. The ship's hum shifted pitch as a command went through the living walls. The main display flickered. Static gave way to a gray-green wash of thermal imaging. The surface of verdant drift scrolled past, collapsed processor struts, cooling debris. The violet soil churned into deep furrows. Lyndon leaned forward. There, a cluster of heat signatures, small, moving, 4 of them, maybe 5. They were deep in the sub-basement tunnel system that ran beneath the processor. They were not still. How many, Lyndon asked. Krell's spurs flickered. 5, possibly 4. The signal is intermittent. The thermal profile is consistent with human physiology. Lyndon straightened. He turned from the display and faced Krell directly. I need an extraction window. Krell's fingers resumed their movement across the Nexus. Their voice carried the dry rustle of irritation. That is not possible. The free systems have reinforced the region with ground-to-wear emplacements in the last 6 hours. 3 separate batteries now cover the area within a 40-kilometer radius of the processor. The Weeping Spear cannot risk a low-altitude approach. Lyndon said nothing. Krell's spurs pulsed slower now, calculating. The survivors are not worth the ship. The negotiation with the free systems has already failed. The trade route is lost. Retrieving 4 human lives does not change the balance sheet. Lyndon looked at the Sporewind trade factor. He looked at the soft bark of their skin and the slow amber light of their spurs. He looked at the way they did not understand what they had just said. He kept his voice flat. If this ship does not retrieve those survivors, I will open a direct channel to the Free Systems command frequency. I will broadcast every proprietary marker code the Sporewind holds in the verdant drift. All of them. The hidden relay stations, the encrypted supply caches, the unregistered processing depots, every asset you have spent the last 43 cycles building. Krell went still. The bridge fell silent. Even the ship's hum seemed to drop in pitch. Krell's spurs dimmed to a dull, flat orange, the color of something being recalculated from scratch. They spoke slowly. You do not have access to those codes. Lyndon stared at them. They watched him for a long, quiet moment. Their spurs flickered once, twice. Then Krell asked the question that mattered. How did you discover them? Lyndon did not answer. He did not need to. Krell understood the shape of the threat even if they did not understand its source. Lyndon had not raised his voice. He had not moved from his station. He had not offered a negotiation. He had simply stated what he would do. Krell's spurs brightened again, not irritation this time, but something else. Something that made them hold still the way a prey animal holds still when it realizes it has been in a predator's field of vision longer than it thought. They spoke carefully. A single approach window, flyby at maximum speed. A magnetic tether deployed for retrieval. The extraction window is 4 minutes. The humans must reach a surface clearing and hold position. If they are not there, the ship will not return. Lyndon nodded once. He turned back to the communication station and began transmitting. He did not use the Sporewind relay network. He pulled up an old military frequency, the one that went through the human neural implant directly. The one no alien species had ever been given access to. He keyed in the coordinates. He sent the burst. The display showed nothing but static for 3 seconds. Then, for a single heartbeat, a pulse of light blinked on the screen. A human biosignature, Tess Corwin's. Then it was gone. Lyndon lowered his hands from the console. He stood there in the warm, humid air of the living ship. He did not know if she had received the transmission. He did not know if she was still alive. He did not know if any of them were. But he had done what he could, and the Sporewind had learned something they would not forget. A human threatened them not because he expected to live. He threatened them because he was already willing to die. The calculation made no sense to Krell. They had no word for what drove it. But they would remember it. 600 kilometers below the bridge, Tess's implant buzzed against her skull. She was crouched in a dark tunnel with dust still settling around her. Bethany was pressed against the wall beside her, a gash on her temple leaking blood down the side of her face. The disc was a heavy weight in Tess's jacket. The coordinates landed in her vision, a surface clearing 2 kilometers east, 40 minutes to extraction. Tess looked at her squad. They were hurt. They were exhausted. Reyes was gripping his ribs like they might fall out. Donnelly had a deep cut on his forearm. Bethany's blood was already drying on her skin. Tess stood up. She looked at the dark tunnel ahead. She looked at the weight in her jacket. She told them to run anyway. The narrow tunnel pressed in around them. The walls were smooth and dark, marked with patterns that shifted each time Tess's neural implant tried to parse them. Her eye kept catching motion at the edge of her vision, but it was only the glyphs rearranging themselves, refusing to settle into meaning. 20 minutes of walking, maybe longer, time distorted underground. Sage moved in the middle of the group, their bioluminescent nodules flickering a dim amber. Fatigue. The Sporewind medic had not complained once, but their gait had shortened, their breathing grown shallow. Bethany walked behind them, her rifle angled at the darkness they left behind. The 2 surviving conscripts, names Tess did not ask for, could not afford to learn, trailed at the rear. The disc sat in Tess's jacket like a second heart. The tunnel opened without warning. One moment it was a corridor. The next, the walls fell away into a chamber so large that Tess's light beam vanished before it found the far edge. She raised her lamp and swept it across the nearest surface. Glyphs, human glyphs. She knew them before her implant confirmed it, the same script as the disc, the same clean lines and geometric precision. She traced them with her light. They depicted figures walking through a forest, tall trunks, branches interlaced above. The figures had 2 arms, 2 legs, upright posture, human. The forest was Earth. Bethany stepped up beside her. Her voice was quiet. "What is this place?" Tess shook her head. She did not know, not yet. Sage moved to the wall and pressed their palm against the surface. Their bioluminescent nodules flared to a pale green as they read the material through whatever sense their species used. A long silence. Then they withdrew their hand. "Not natural," Sage said. "A composite, engineered. It predates any known Sporewind construction method by tens of thousands of years." Bethany exhaled. "That's not possible." Sage did not answer. Tess pulled the disc from her jacket. She held it in both hands. She did not activate it, but it vibrated against her palms, a low hum that resonated through her bones. The glyphs on the wall responded. The patterns pulsed with a soft blue light, synchronized to the disc's frequency. The floor shifted beneath them. A panel slid open, smooth as oil on water. A staircase descended into darkness below. The steps were human proportion, just like the ones above. Same dimensions, same shallow risers, designed for legs that bent at the knee and walked upright. Tess led the squad down. The lower chamber was a gallery. Rows of pedestals lined the walls. Each one held a disc identical to hers. Hundreds of them, thousands. They filled the room with a low chorus of vibration, a whisper of data waiting to be spoken. The hum pressed against Tess's chest like a heartbeat, a bass note so deep it felt tectonic. She stopped walking. The others stopped behind her. The air was dry and cold, no smell at all. It was the cleanest air Tess had breathed since she was a child. The blue light from the glyphs cast no shadows. It filled the room evenly, like light underwater. Tess understood. This was a seed vault, not of plants, of memory. Human memory, stored before the fall of an empire so old that no living species remembered its name. The Sporewind had built their trade network on a world that was once human. They had built a processor on top of a graveyard. Sage stopped beside a pedestal near the far wall. Their bioluminescent nodules flickered rapidly. They pointed to a disc on the pedestal. It bore a symbol that matched a marker on Sage's own equipment, a Sporewind insignia. A long silence stretched. Sage's voice was dry, like leaves shifting. "My people found this place before." Tess turned to face them. "We sealed it," Sage said. "We hid it, and we built the processor on top of it to make sure no one would ever find it again." Bethany's voice was hard, so you knew. Sage nodded once. Krell knew. The Trade Council knew. This world was chosen for the expedition because it contained a threat that needed to remain buried. Tess looked at the gallery again. Thousands of discs, thousands of voices. Her ancestors had built things that still functioned after 10,000 years. They had built things that empires feared enough to bury. And she was their descendant. She grew up in conscript barracks. She was told she was nothing, a biological asset, a tool with a short shelf life, but this place said otherwise. This place said her bloodline had outlasted every empire that had tried to erase it. She was not nothing. Tess walked to the pedestal Sage had indicated. She took the second disc from its resting place. It was heavier than the first, or maybe that was her imagination. The Sporewind symbol on its surface caught the blue light and reflected it at a different angle, like a scar. She slotted it into her jacket next to the first. Then she heard it. A scrape from the tunnel above, then a footfall. Something was moving in the darkness they had left behind. Tess raised her rifle. She did not breathe. Bethany whispered, "That's not the biotank." No, it was not. The biotank was too large for the tunnel. This sound was measured, deliberate, something that knew where the steps were, something that did not need light. The gallery's hum continued, indifferent to their fear. Tess looked at the staircase. The shadows at the top were still, but something had made that sound. Something was waiting for them to go back up, or something was coming down. She had 2 discs, a room full of human memory, a squad that had not slept in 30 hours, and no way out. Tess chambered around and took aim at the top of the stairs. Tess hit the first piece of debris and her fingers slipped. Blood wet the stone. She grabbed harder. "Move," she said, "move faster." Bethany pulled the hollow seed from her pack. The canister was cold and dull gray against her palm. She held it up. "Tess, if we use this." Tess heard the scraping. It was closer now. A dry rhythm, chitin on stone. The hunter was gaining. She looked at Bethany. She looked at the gap of daylight above them, 2 minutes, maybe less. "Deploy it," Tess said. Bethany did not argue. She armed the canister and threw it down the tunnel. The sound of it rolling was small and final. Then the crack came, flat and magnetic. It hit Tess behind the eyes. The hum behind her ear died. The implant went silent. No targeting data, no threat assessment. No blue lines tracing the geometry of the tunnel, just the cold absence where the hum used to be. Tess felt it like a tooth pulled from her skull. The silence was wrong. The silence was empty. Bethany cried out behind her. Tess turned. Bethany was on the ground. Her hands were pressed to the side of her head. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out now. Her implant was newer. The shutdown was more violent. Tess dropped to her knees. She grabbed Bethany's arm and pulled her up. Bethany was shaking. Her eyes were unfocused. "Stay with me," Tess said. Bethany blinked. Her pupils tracked back to Tess's face. She nodded. She did not speak. Tess looked down the tunnel. The hunter was still moving. It was slower now. Its weapon hung dark and useless at its side. But it was still moving. 4 legs, 4 arms, chitin plates that caught the faint light from above. Tess did not have a weapon. She looked at the debris pile. The extraction window was a minute and a half away, maybe less. The weeping spear was coming. She could hear the distant vibration of its approach felt through the stone. "Climb," she said. She grabbed the first piece of rubble, a slab of composite stone the size of her torso. Her fingers left red smears on the surface. She pulled, the slab shifted. She pulled again, it moved. She threw it aside. Bethany was next to her now, hands on the debris, pulling. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts. Sage joined them. The medic's bioluminescent nodules were dim and slow. The hollow seed burst had hit them too. Their movements were uncoordinated, but they kept pulling. Tess's hands were wet. The blood was warm. She could not tell if it was hers or the hunter's. It did not matter. Another slab, another. The gap was widening. Tess could see sky now, real sky, gray and cold and full of clouds. Behind her, the hunter lunged. Tess turned. She did not have time to think. She did not have time to plan. The hunter was there. 4 arms reaching, mandibles clicking. The smell of it hit her dry and alkaline like dust from a broken machine. Tess hit it in the face. Her fist connected with the chitin. The impact traveled up her arm. Pain flared in her knuckles. She did not stop. The chitin cracked. A thin fracture line ran across the hunter's faceplates. It staggered. Its legs splayed. It was not expecting the blow. It was not expecting her to still be standing. It was not expecting her to swing again. Tess hit it a second time. The crack widened. The hunter's mandibles went slack. It fell backward. Its limbs twitched once and then went still. Tess stood over it. Her hands were bleeding. Her knuckles were torn. She did not know why her blow broke the chitin. She did not know why she was still standing. She only knew that she had not stopped, and that had been enough. Behind her, Sage was watching. The medic had stopped pulling debris. They were pressed against the wall, their bioluminescent nodules flickering in a pattern Tess had never seen. Fear. Sage was afraid, not of the hunter, of her, of the creature that kept moving when it should have stopped. Sage had never seen anything fight past the point of injury. They had never seen anything fight past the point of sense. Tess looked away from them. She looked at Bethany. Bethany was crouched on the debris pile, one hand braced against the stone. Her face was pale, but she was standing. The weeping spear passed overhead. The shadow of it darkened the gap. The air vibrated with its passage. A magnetic tether dropped through the debris. It swayed in the wind, trailing thin filaments of energy. Tess grabbed it. The metal was cold in her bleeding hand. She wrapped it around Bethany's waist. Then she pulled Sage forward and wrapped it around them. Then she wrapped the remaining length around herself. The tether tightened. Tess felt the pull. Her feet left the debris. She rose through the gap. The stones scraped her shoulder. She did not care. The discs were pressed against her chest under her jacket. The weight of them was solid and real. The wind hit her face, cold and loud in her ears. Below her, the surface of the verdant drift shrank to a point. The violet grass became a blur. The collapsed processor became a scar on the ground. The tunnel entrance became a black dot. Tess looked at the horizon. The sky was gray and endless. The clouds were thin and high. The wind was cold. Her hands were bleeding. Her implant was dead. She had no idea what came next. She realized she did not want to die anymore. The tether pulled her into the belly of the weeping spear. The ship's bioweb sealed around her. The smell of wet earth filled her lungs. She was still holding the discs. She was still holding Bethany's hand. She was still alive. The medical bay lights were a soft, steady white. No shadows anywhere. Tess found the flatness of it unsettling after the blue glow of the gallery. Sage finished wrapping the last bandage around Tess's right hand. Their fingers were warm and slightly rough, covered in a fine moss that smelled faintly of rain. They pressed the dressing flat and stepped back. "The bones are cracked, but they will heal," Sage said. Their bioluminescent nodules pulsed a slow, steady green. "Do you want pain suppressants?" "No." Sage's nodules flickered. That was their version of a pause. They did not argue. They simply turned and placed the remaining supplies back into the storage niche, their movements careful and deliberate. Captain Linden stood by the door, arms crossed. His gray beard needed trimming. His eyes moved from Tess to the tray beside her bed, where the two discs sat like dark mirrors. He did not touch them. "The extraction cost Krell's faction significant political capital," he said. His voice was flat, tired. "The free systems have declared the verdant drift a contested zone. The Sporewind cannot reclaim the processor." Tess said nothing. She watched him. Linden shifted his weight. "You bought us something. I do not know what yet, but something." The door opened. Krell stepped inside. Their bark-like skin looked duller than usual. The sensory spurs along their neck hung limp and pale. They stopped at the foot of Tess's bed and stood very still. "The discs are human property," Krell said. Their voice was quiet, measured. "Dry leaves shifting over stone. We have no claim to them. I will not report this discovery to my superiors." Tess waited. Krell's spurs flickered. "I offer a trade. The discs in exchange for the Sporewind marker codes you discovered in the console." Tess looked at Linden. He gave a small nod, just a dip of his chin. Permission or resignation, she could not tell which. She looked back at Krell. The codes were already transmitted. They were sent to a neutral relay 6 hours ago. I did it before the extraction. The codes are public now. Krell went still. Their spurs flared bright amber, a hot and angry pulse. Then they dimmed. The color bled out until they were gray again, flat and cold. "Why?" Tess considered the question. She thought about the gallery beneath the processor, the thousands of discs, the knowledge hidden so deep that an empire built a machine on top of it to keep it buried. "Because the codes should not belong to anyone," she said. "They belong to a civilization that hid knowledge instead of sharing it. I do not want to be that kind of person." Krell stared at her, their mouth opened, closed. For a long moment they said nothing. Then they turned and walked out. The door sealed behind them. Sage remained. They stood beside the tray, looking down at the discs. Their nodules pulsed a faint, curious blue. "What will you do with them?" Tess sat up slowly. Her hands ached inside the bandages. She reached for the first disc, the one with the forest memory, the sky the color of oceans, the language she almost remembered. "I will find out what they contain," she said. "I will wake the memories, and I will decide who gets to see them." Sage's nodules flickered again. "That is not a small thing." "No, it is not." Sage inclined their head. A gesture of respect, Tess realized, or something close to it. They stepped back, gathered their supplies, and left without another word. The door sealed. Lyndon uncrossed his arms. He walked to the foot of her bed and stopped there. He looked old, tired, but something else moved behind his eyes, something that had been buried for a long time. "You are no longer a conscript," he said. "I am activating emergency protocols to have your status changed. You will be listed as recovered and reassigned to my command." Tess watched him. "You will have a choice," Lyndon said. "Discharge or service with full rights. You can walk away from this. No one will stop you." Tess looked down at the disc in her bandaged hand. The metal was cold. She touched the edge with her thumb and felt a faint vibration, the whisper of data waiting to be spoken. The discs were not dead. They were patient. "I will think about it," she said. Lyndon nodded. He turned and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. "Take your time," he said. "You have earned it." The door sealed behind him. Tess sat alone in the flat white light. Bethany slept in the next bed, her breathing slow and even. The discs sat on the tray beside her, two dark mirrors waiting for a word. She picked up the second disc, the one with the Sporewind insignia. She held it in her palm and felt the vibration, the same whisper, the same patience. She thought about the gallery. Thousands of discs, thousands of memories, a seed vault built by a civilization that had known it would be buried. They had not hidden the knowledge from the galaxy. They had hidden it from time. And now it belonged to her. She did not activate the disc. She set it back on the tray and lay down. She stared at the ceiling and listened to Bethany breathe. The weeping spear dropped out of transit 6 hours later. Tess stood at the observation window in a clean set of coveralls. Her hands were still bandaged. The first disc was in her right palm, cold and patient. The station was crowded. Docks stretched in every direction, filled with ships from a dozen species. Sporewind transports, free systems freighters, ships she did not recognize with hulls shaped like bones and wings and shells. They traded and moved and ignored each other. She thought about the forest memory, the sky the color of oceans, the language she almost remembered. She thought about the gallery, how many of those memories were waiting, how long they had waited already. No one else knew they existed. The door opened behind her. She did not turn. Lyndon's footsteps stopped a few paces back. The metal floor hummed under his boots. "I will stay," she said. "I have work to do." He was quiet for a moment, then she heard him nod. "I thought you might say that." She turned. He stood with his hands behind his back, watching her with that same look, something old and buried, finally stirring. "What do you need?" he said. "Time and a ship that does not report to the Sporewind." Lyndon almost smiled. "I think I can arrange that." He turned and walked back down the corridor. His footsteps faded. Tess turned back to the window. The station rotated slowly against a field of stars. Ships came and went. Deals were made. Empires shifted like tectonic plates, slow and grinding. None of them knew what she held in her hand. She looked down at the disc. The metal caught the light and threw it back, silver and flat and patient. Somewhere out there, an empire that thought it had buried humanity was about to find out that the grave was empty. She closed her fingers around the disc. The vibration hummed against her bandages, waiting for her to decide. She was not ready yet, but she would be.